Good evening, everyone. It is Thursday night, it's 10 p.m, so that can only mean one thing: young adult bedtime stories. Now, tonight you might need to go grab your blanket, and you may even need your teddy bear, and possibly even a hot chocolate, because tonight's story is a little bit scary. Chosen by Claire Wallace, Little Miss Scary. Thank you, Claire, for choosing this one for me. I really appreciate it. So, are you ready? Have you got your blanket? Have you got your bear? Let's get into it. Little Miss Scary lived near the top of a mountain in a house called Spooky Cottage. When it was dark, she would creep into the valley below, making sure that nobody saw her. And there she would wait very quietly until somebody came along. And then when that somebody did, she would tiptoe up behind them, open her mouth wide and shout, "Boo!" And do you know why Little Miss Scary did this? For fun. You see, she loved to scare people more than anything else in the world, and she was very good at it. She scared them stiff. She scared them out of their wits. She scared them right out of their socks. About a week ago, Mr. Noisy went to see his friend Mr. Jelly. Mr. Noisy was worried because he hadn't heard from his friend for ages. When he got to Mr. Jelly's house, he knocked on the door. Spookily, the door swung open by itself. "Hello?" called Mr. Noisy, as softly as he could, which for you or me would have been a shout. Then he heard a chattering noise coming from the bedroom. Mr. Noisy found Mr. Jelly hiding under his bed, his teeth chattering in fear. "Whatever's the—" began Mr. Noisy, and then remembered himself. "Whatever's the matter, Mr. Jelly?" It's Little Miss Scary," chattered Mr. Jelly, trembling in fear. She keeps jumping out and shouting, "Boo at me!" Mr. Noisy made Mr. Jelly a cup of tea, calmed him down, and told him what they were going to do. Just as it was getting dark, they hid behind a bush beside the lane that led up to Mr. Jelly's house. They waited until they saw Little Miss Scary's shadowy figure creeping past them. Then Mr. Noisy and Mr. Jelly crept out from their hiding place, tiptoed up behind Little Miss Scary, and, at the top of their voices, shouted, "Boo!" Now, the top of Mr. Noisy's voice is a very loud place indeed. So loud that Little Miss Scary leapt 5 feet in the air, and when she came down, she ran for her life. She didn't stop running until she was hidden under her bed, in her bedroom, in Spooky Cottage at the top of the mountain. "I don't think you'll be seeing so much of her for a long time, Mr. Jelly," chuckled Mr. Noisy. "Mr. Jelly? Mr. Jelly!" But there was no sign of Mr. Jelly either. Mr. Noisy chuckled again and walked back to Mr. Jelly's house to have a look under Mr. Jelly's bed. What a lovely story. Now, who here has maybe felt a little bit like Mr. Jelly at times? Probably quite a few of us. I know I definitely have been feeling a little bit scared at the moment of the world around us. We live in a scary place at the moment. But God tells us not to be afraid. It says in the Bible in John 14, verse 27, Jesus says this, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Your heart must not be troubled or fearful." Your heart must not be troubled or fearful. Jesus tells us not to be afraid, and he gives us this peace. How awesome is that? How about we spend some time as a young adults community to just rest and dwell in his peace this coming week? It's a great thing to get together and pray for one another as well. If you're not feeling so great at the moment, make sure you're in a community that loves you and will pray for you in this time. We have a God who wants us to be courageous. We have a God who is shouting for us over this land, a bit like Mr. Noisy did for Mr. Jelly. So lean into that truth this week, that God is for you, so nothing can come against you. I hope you have a great rest tonight, and I hope you really enjoyed the story tonight as well. Good night.